I'm Tony Ruiz of Gold Derby here with Kris Bowers, the Emmy-winning composer of Bridgerton. He was an Oscar nominee uh, earlier this year for his short film, A Concerto as a Conversation. Um, and Kris, first of all, you've had just kind of like this whirlwind uh, few months, I think, with the Oscars, and then still working on top of that. Just how do you even kind of process everything that's happened career-wise in the last few months?
Man, Tony, it's it's pretty wild. I think that primarily I have so much work in front of me that I'm just focused on getting that done and trying to make sure that I just keep going. I haven't really had a moment to kind of sit and process it, which I'm hoping to sometime soon. But I feel anytime I do have like a small moment to really just like think and reflect, or I have like little moments where I just kind of journal about things like that, and it's pretty wild. I feel very thankful.
So Bridgerton is certainly not a standard period piece. I think everybody realizes that. So when you go into it, where do you even start with something that wants to have a modern spin and yet still has this period? Does that create a special challenge for you?
Yeah, definitely. It was a pretty huge challenge. I'd say the first thing that we tried having this idea that I remember Chris and Betsy were saying this is not your mother, your grandmother's, Regency drama. And they wanted to really try to find something really fresh and new with the music. And so my mind immediately thought very modern. And so the first idea I took I would like write these little classical vignettes and then kind of like chop and screw them essentially and do like these little remixed hip hop tracks or like pop tracks or things like that. And that really didn't work for us. And then I tried something that was very, very traditional and tried to write in the style more of like Beethoven or something like that, like, the classical era. And that didn't really work. And two things that really helped were a piano piece that Chris Van Dusen sent me as a reference for Simon and Daphne's theme. And we had to come up with that theme really early on because they were shooting episode 3, having her actually play piano. And so that piece, him sending me those references, which were these Ravel piano pieces, really opened up another even really like era that I wasn't thinking of musically, and starting to think of it with that as an option really opened up my mind as far as like how I could approach it harmonically or melodically or just even how I would orchestrate or any of that kind of stuff. And then the second thing that was really helpful and opened my mind up was once we got into the spotting session, hearing the songs that Alex Patsavas was placing, those, hearing the Ariana Grande or, the Duomo covers or any of those things, and starting to hear these pop tracks in that context and hearing those arrangements where they're really great at getting like the groove in just a few instruments. How could I try to infuse some of that into the writing as well, as far as looking more at like pop music for grooves and rhythms, as far as how I wanted to then translate that into the orchestra.
You talk about orchestrations, and I feel like it's one of those aspects of composing that I don't think gets enough attention, because it's one thing to come up with the melodies and come up with the notes, but it's another thing to figure out the instrumentation and what it's going to look like and sound like. So in a piece like this that is both period and contemporary, where do you even start with that kind of thing?
I mean, for me, it's really just like studying and going back to a lot of stuff that where I can just get an actual Ravel score and look at how some of those things are orchestrated or things like that. And outside of that, I feel like it's just trying to follow the show. I think that it's really about that at the end of the day, and being mindful of the instrumentation that we're going to have, just logistically with it being COVID and us having to record remotely and all that kind of stuff. So, I knew that I didn't want to do that much experimentation or anything like that, and wanted to just focus on a pretty solid ensemble. But really, Chris Van Dusen had, by the time we got into spotting sessions, had a pretty clear idea of at least emotionally what he wanted. And even if they had a cue in the temp music that was too traditional, that provides so much. If they're temping it with really traditional classical music, that music is just so well written and so well orchestrated that it's doing a lot of work. Like if you substitute that with something that feels thin and not that thoroughly orchestrated, you're going to, at least for me, feel the difference. And so I think that having those pieces as temp really set the bar, and then just trying to make sure that it really served the show.
Uh, you mentioned, of course, putting this together during the pandemic, I'm sure was a unique challenge, but did that challenge enhance the experience? Did it enhance the final product, or how do you think it contributed to that?
I think it for me, it made me feel even more connected to and appreciative of, maybe more appreciative of. I feel like we didn't actually, get to talk or connect that much, but with the musicians, I think that you go to a session, you have like 50 string players, and there's some that I am familiar with and say hello to, but there's so many people that I just kind of see for a brief moment, and they're putting so much love and heart into the music, and it's a quick process. You're in the studio and trying to get through it because you have to get through all this music in X amount of minutes, and you're against the clock. And with this, we decided to reach out to a handful of musicians and have them work with us to layer themselves to create this orchestral sound. So if you have this piece where you hear, like the end of episode 1, this huge, massive orchestral sound that's just less than 15 players, maybe like 12 musicians, one percussionist that's layered himself. Each string section is just one person that's layered themselves, sometimes on a different instrument, and really working with my mixing engineer Steve K, who was able to help each of these musicians figure out the best way to mic themselves for what we wanted, and figuring out that process. But then you think about this musician sitting there and playing this music, and now having to be their own engineer and recording themselves, and we would give them, instead of 3 hours to do X amount of minutes, now you have a whole day, and whenever you have time during this pandemic to also record this music for this TV show. So I think that, like, for me, the whole time I just kept thinking about, I look at anything that I'm going through this pandemic, and now I'm imagining all these musicians that are sitting there playing this music over and over again, because they're not only trying to get the best take, but then having to get the best take multiple times, and then being their own engineers and sending it to us, and file, like, it's all this stuff that they never had been expected to do before this. And the music sounds incredible because of the way they're playing it and the emotion they're putting into it. And I just feel incredibly thankful, just because without musicians, we could have had a score that really wouldn't have, it could have been the exact same music, but it wouldn't have felt the same. It wouldn't have had this, like, heart to it. And so I think that the amount of effort that went into it, I think, can really be felt, at least for me, when I think about it. Yeah.
Yeah, I would think that there must have been discussions during the process of possibly just doing this electronically, rather than using actual instrumentation. How much was that ever even a consideration, or was your goal always to have this be as authentic as possible?
Yeah, I think that's the thing I really appreciate about Shondaland and Kris and Betsy and Scott. Like, everybody there was just, from the very beginning, they were like, we want this to be great. So, like, what is it going to take for that to happen? We don't really want to cut any corners. And we immediately told them, well, we have to record live instruments, and it's also the pandemic, because we started this. Luckily, I had just finished Mrs. America, and we had done the last few episodes and figured out a system that felt really good for that. But this already was going to be a much bigger sound than that, as far as, like, some of the things that they were temping with. And so we were like, if you want this, it's already feeling so great because all of this temp is amazing, and it's a lot of really incredible classical music that's a full orchestra and all of this. And so if we don't at least try to get something close to that, we're going to lose a lot. And they really just heard that and trusted us, and they were like, whatever you guys need to kind of figure that out. So from the very beginning, I remember Scott calling me and saying, like, let me know what it's going to take to get this done, to make it as great as possible, because that's what we want to do. Yeah.
I think, again, one of the things that comes out of the show, one of the reasons why the show is so successful, is because of this bridge of period and contemporary. And I think that's totally clear in the classical takes on these pop songs that, many of which are done by, Vitamin String Quartet and things like that. What is it do you think about classical music that is really seems to be kind of like entering into it almost seems to be having a resurgence right now?
Yeah, I mean, it's really exciting. With this, I remember I was at a session and this violinist who's a friend of mine from high school, Rhea Fowler, but she plays on a lot of my sessions. And she was like, I just have to tell you that I actually have gotten a few people that have reached out to me specifically because they saw Bridgerton and heard the music and decided they wanted to learn how to play violin. And they're like high school students or middle school students. And that's pretty incredible. And I feel like, thinking about the covers that are in Bridgerton or even in like Promising Young Women or any of these like classical takes on things, I feel like I remember when one of my mentors and somebody I used to play with, Marcus Miller, talked about how there was a period in jazz where we would play the standards of the day. So if you went to Broadway and heard a musical, you can go down to the Village and hear a jazz band play a song that you just heard a version of. And so you can sing it, how to, you can, even if they're abstracting it or making it feel different, you still hear that melody and you can kind of emotionally feel pulled into the piece. And I feel like with these covers, that's what's happening. Like, when I think of the moment where Thank You Next comes on in Bridgerton, and you immediately feel all of the feelings you might feel when you hear that song. Or I think about like, my wife singing that song or thinking about that song, or my mother-in-law, like they talk about all of their relationships and anything that they might associate with that song. And that immediately makes so much sense in the context of this show, but you're just hearing in this classical, like beautifully done rendition. And so I feel like it's these covers that are connecting to us because they're the songs that we know and they're the standards of the day, and just done in these really musical ways.
Do period pieces in and of themselves, because you've done several period things, you've also equally done contemporary things, you've also written your own musical compositions, symphonic compositions and things like that. Is there one avenue where you feel like the most comfortable, or do you just like the challenge of all of these different genres that you tackle?
I definitely like the challenge. Ultimately, I feel like where I'm most comfortable is me singing at a piano and like, no rules. I feel like that's where I feel most at home, actually. And I think this is kind of a version of that, because as a composer, we're sitting here at this MIDI keyboard, like, and trying to come up with anything. But I've always felt like anytime I feel complacent or I'm not pushing myself, or I feel like I'm doing the same things, I feel really that feels more frustrating than anything else for me. So I always put myself in these positions where then I feel like, how am I going to figure out how to do this? And the only way I can do that is to like grow and become a different composer or a different musician or anything like that. And so I'm constantly, it's almost subconscious at this point that I'm just constantly searching for these things that are going to really, really challenge me in those ways, because I feel like otherwise, like what's the point of being, I just want to learn so much that it's really great to have these opportunities to make that my job, to just learn and grow. Yeah.
Now, are you continuing with the second season of Bridgerton?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So I have to wonder. So because it's because this first season is so successful and has really captured the viewing public, does that put more pressure on you when it comes to the next season, or do you just see it as its own unique challenge?
I think the thing about a project like this that's so great is at least for me, and I think most of the people that were involved, but I can only speak my own experience. I didn't know what the show was going to be or how it was going to be received. My focus was on trying to write great music, and like not even thinking about any of that. And nobody was talking about, oh, this show is going to be successful, or like, we didn't even know what day it was going to come out. So the fact that it came out on Christmas was even an unknown thing. And so I feel like when you're in a situation like that, you just put your head down and focus on getting the work done. And this is the kind of thing that happens with that. And so I feel like that's the thing to repeat, is just to focus on trying to write even better music than last time. And I don't think any Bridgerton fan can be a bigger critic than myself how to do that. So I think I have my own like internal challenge that I'll be facing. But yeah, I think it'll just be another fun thing.
Does does the fact that the second season is going to cover, be really from an entirely new story, focusing really on the brother, does that make it? Are you going to be carrying over things from the first season, or are you looking for that to have its own kind of unique musical identity?
I think that's something that Kris and I will have to talk about when we start getting into it. I'm curious to see what he wants to do. I mean, I think that the show itself does have such a strong sonic identity that will probably go with that as far as palette or anything like that. But theme wise, I'm excited to explore all different themes. And, like Simon and Daphne's theme was such a huge part of the score last season. And, that won't really be there this year. And so trying to find a way to focus on this story or any of the new characters that we get to know. I'm excited to like find new musical themes and things like that. And I'm curious to see what does continue from last season. I actually don't know, since I haven't read anything or seen anything yet, like what happens. But I think there are a few themes and ideas that can kind of bleed into it, and like the whistle down theme, or the Featheringtons, or any of that. But yeah, I'm curious to see what happens.
Any further forays maybe into filmmaking for you?
Yeah, I'm hopeful. We're looking at trying to find a way to do a bit more with Concerto, as far as like facilitating other conversations with people with their elders, and then working on a project with my wife. My wife and I've started a bit of a production company, and really just because we're like have so many ideas, and things are starting to snowball. And actually today she was just nominated for a daytime Emmy, and so yeah, we're trying to figure out how to. She's an actress, and me as a composer, we just love storytelling, and so I think that we're curious how to find a way to do that, but primarily focused on our part in that, like whether it's a music driven story or for my side of things, at least. Yeah.
Well, congratulations to you, and congratulations to your wife.
Yeah.
Everybody go to goldderby.com, make your predictions for the Emmys, and stay tuned for more interviews with contenders throughout the season. Kris Bowers, thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks so much.